This is Phil Shore, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber.
Sidearm whip, scores!
Now it's one. Padel scores! Hands off for Rabel, switches hands and scores!
Carly O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Right off the bat, there's Lyle Thompson.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam, and together we're bringing you interviews from all your favorite players and coaches, as well as news and analysis from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. We're here with Phil Shore, a sports reporter whose work has appeared in the Boston Globe, New England Lacrosse Journal, and US Lacrosse Magazine.com, and he's also the author of the upcoming book, Major League Life, Why Major League Lacrosse Players, Coaches, and Fans Share a Passion for a League That Often Goes Overlooked. Phil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm excited to talk with you guys. I know we've exchanged messages on social media a lot. You guys have been doing a lot of cool stuff, so it's exciting to see your guys' faces and chat with you. It's really cool. Thank you.
No, absolutely. We're excited to, kind of officially meet you in person. Like you said, we've DM'd a few times and talked about the game offline a little bit. We'll be excited to talk a little bit more about your thoughts on the game right now, as well as your book. But before we get into the MLL a little bit, let's kind of talk about your own experience with lacrosse. How did you first get involved in the game?
So I grew up in Toms River, New Jersey, known for Toms River Little League Baseball. Todd Frazier, or a Little League World Series champion. And my freshman year of high school was the first year they had lacrosse in our district as a high school sport. And I played soccer, and me and a bunch of my friends from soccer were like, we don't really want to run track and we don't play baseball. This will be something fun to do together and just stay active till soccer season comes around. So I had seen a game or two here and there, so I had an idea of what it looked like. I had never played it, but figured it's a new sport in our school, so everybody probably was around the same level as me. And it was very hard to pick up at first, I remember. And I remember one day being at practice and just being like, especially we had a lot of football players on the team, so I was like, I'm coming here. I'm not doing really well. I'm running around, and I'm getting hit really hard. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing? And then I think it was the very next game, I got my first assist, and I was like, oh, okay. And I started picking it up, and as soon as you started picking it up, it became so addicting. And that's how I kind of stuck with it. It got to be a lot of fun once I started learning it. Because I think part of the problem too was just trying to get the program off the ground and get the varsity program running. There wasn't as much kind of focus on the newer kids. So at first it was a little daunting, but once I started getting the hang of it, it was really addicting. So that's where it all started.
That's great. Yeah, and South Jersey lacrosse is really growing. I mean, you got Toms River, Shawnee. I played with a bunch of guys in college from Shawnee. Morristown's obviously always stacked. So, it's growing in South Jersey.
Yeah. I think when, especially like our conference, when we started playing, it was CBA and Manasquan were like the only 2 schools that had teams. They were really good. They had been playing for a while. So you start playing those teams and you get shellacked by them, and then once you start getting a little better and competing, then you get to play a Shawnee or someone, and you're like, oh, they're even that much further ahead of us. And that's not even including the North Jersey teams, especially the parochial schools up north. It's definitely grown. It's fun to see.
It's awesome. I'm right now here in Brick, coming from you, where I'm with my future in-laws, and I know I forget his name. There's some kid from Manasquan that just committed to Syracuse. That my fiance's uncle knows. So again, like you said, it's starting to, really pick up in this area. And it's exciting, kind of see the growth of it. I'm a New Jersey resident, I guess you could say. I've only been here for 2 years, but I'm enjoying it, and it's nice being close to the beach too. It must have been kind of nice having some good weather, I feel like, when you had lacrosse season.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I remember the beginning of the season was always kind of weird. I remember one game we played, we were playing at Brick Township, and it was hailing in the middle of the game, and you're like, what is going on? Like, the sun's out and it's hailing. But as the season got on, it was really nice. And I remember the first game we had in program history was against one of the other. There's 3 high schools in Toms River, 3 public schools, 3 public and 1 Catholic. And our first game was against one of the other Toms River schools, and we had like this big kind of like barbecue celebration of both programs starting. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
No, that's awesome. The community aspect of lacrosse, I think, is always the best part of the sport. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that with the MLL. But you went on to Emerson College where you played lacrosse there as well. Talk to us about playing at Emerson as well as kind of finding that love for journalism.
So the love for journalism is how I wound up at Emerson. It was something that I always wanted to do ever since I was a little kid. I was, I'd watch SportsCenter in the morning and write down all the stats in a notebook. I don't know why, but I needed to know how many points Dale Ellis had for the Nuggets that night. I remember I was in one of the gifted and talented classes, and we had to do like a prospective career project. And I remember I taped a Dolphins-Jets game, and I made like a highlight reel using the VCR, like cutting and editing and doing voiceover over it. So that was something I always wanted to do. I figured, every kid wants to play professional sports. And, I thought I definitely would for sure because I really wanted to. But I also knew that those careers don't last very long. So I was like, okay, well, that'll keep me involved in sports. So it was something I always wanted to do. And that's why Emerson was definitely on my horizon because they have a great journalism school. And then lacrosse was definitely a bonus. While I joined late and I'm not the most gifted athletic player ever. So, but it was an opportunity to keep playing. I got to be an NCAA student athlete. And it was really cool because when I got there, it was an immediate group of friends that I had. Because I am by nature, it's kind of surprising for journalism, but I am very shy. I'm kind of withdrawn. It takes a while for me to warm up to people. So, going to school in the middle of Boston, it does have a little bit of daunting atmosphere to it. But going and being on the lacrosse team and meeting the guys on the team before school even started, you go into school with this built-in group of friends, which is really awesome. And from there, it really grew. We were a very tight group for most of the time there, a lot of us, because we did have so many hardships too. Hardship I use lightly, but adversity certainly. Our school, Emerson, was not known for sports, and a lot of the professors didn't really value it. So, a lot of professors gave you a hard time if you had to miss class for a game or something. So it was trying to work around the schedule, and because of kind of the lack of desire of a lot of people at the school for sports, not only was it tough to get people to come to games and watch and everything, but you felt kind of like an outsider, and it was a lot of extra work to kind of find time to mix and match the classes. And a lot of people went to Emerson with their eye on their career and a dedication to that, which is awesome, but it also meant a lot of people, even people that had played lacrosse before, didn't really want to play. So we also had a small team. I remember one game. We went and traveled, and it was in the middle of the day. It was in Connecticut. We were playing, I think it was Mitchell, and there was one class that we had several players in that professor wouldn't let them go towards the end of the year, and we went with 9 players from the lacrosse team and 3 baseball players.
Wow.
That were just like from Long Island or Baltimore and had thrown a stick, and they were like, all right, well, you have a physical on file. We're going to grab you just to get some bodies. And of the 9 players, 6 of us were freshmen. So it was crazy. And we wound up winning that game though. So that was pretty
That's
awesome.
even crazier.
But it was a lot of crazy stories like that really helped us bond together and made it a lot of fun.
What position did you play?
So I started off at midfield because when I started in high school, I had no idea what positions to play. I didn't know really what any of it entailed, and my coach was just like, hey, we always need more midfielders, so you can be a midfielder. So I stuck with that. I played midfield, especially a lot of defensive midfield. I mean, I think we had 16 guys my freshman year, so you played both ways.
Yeah,
but
you're going to play.
I started off at midfield, but I am not the most fleet of foot or with the most endurance. So my sophomore year and junior year, I played attack. And then we had a coaching change my senior year, and at practice I was exposed because our new coach liked the defense to press beyond the cage, beyond GLE.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very good sitting behind GLE and kind of distributing or rolling the crease, but when there was a player on me, I struggled with my stick skills. So because I'd played midfield, they were like, well, you've had experience on defense and we don't have any pole, so here's a long pole, go play defense. And it's actually the position I probably should have played at the very beginning, my freshman year of high school. It came a lot more natural than everything else, but I played all over. I took some face-offs, but I wound up playing close defense my senior year.
Nice. Everywhere but cage, right?
Everywhere but cage.
Yeah.
And that includes I played crease attack, X attack, wing attack. I played face-off, defensive midi, wing defense, close defense. I went in at LSM when I needed to. Literally every facet of the game except for goalie.
There we go.
And I'm very, very glad I did not try goalie.
Yeah, I would be too. Adam is a goalie though, so that's his spot.
I appreciate. I completely understand though.
That is a challenging position. I took some shots playing defense. I took some shots that hit me, but I can't imagine playing goalie like that.
Not for everyone.
I give credit to you guys.
That's awesome. So let's kind of transition from your playing days to when you started covering the game, in particular, the MLL. So how did that come about and you get in the ranks of covering the pros?
Sure, yeah. So like everything, it kind of built. My junior year at Emerson, 2010, New England Lacrosse Journal, the editor, Chuck Jaffe, was looking to build up the writing staff for that magazine. And obviously he posted at Emerson, but he knew our coach, Mike Blanchard, and was like, hey, I'm posting this at your school. Do you have any writers on your team? So he shared it with me. And so I was like, this is great. And I started off doing a Q&A in the back of the magazine for the monthly issue that I still do to this day, and covering the Boston Blazers of the NLL, going to their games at the TD Garden and doing that stuff for the web. So I started with that. And then I did high school stuff for the Boston Globe. I had my own kind of online radio show / podcast before podcasts were really cool, from Lacrosse Radio Network, called Lacrosse Lounge. So I started doing these things, and I saw an opportunity with US Lacrosse, reached out to the editor, and he brought me on to start doing weekly notebooks. And once you start doing enough of those and doing a good enough job, they let you kind of do a little bit more. So now we're at where, especially during the season, I usually have a feature midweek, a notebook at the end, doing some stuff for the magazine. So it gradually grew as I got more experience. So and that was 2012 where I got on with Lacrosse Magazine.
No, that's great. And you recently did the top 20 players in MLL history. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you go about ranking them? I personally think you did a phenomenal job ranking them. Might be a few, maybe I changed, but everyone's going to have differing opinions. But for the most part, I think you nailed it. So what was your thought process though with how you ranked them? Did you look at statistics? Did you talk to people? I mean, what was your process in it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was definitely nervous about ranking people. Even though it was my idea that I pitched, I was definitely nervous about it because, everybody from the practice squad to the active roster to the Hall of Famers, everybody puts in so much work to get to where they are. So you want to be respectful of that. And just because you're not in my top 20 doesn't mean you're not a great player, doesn't mean that someone else doesn't have you in their top 20. So I appreciate that. I've gotten some good responses from it pretty much. So that's been good. So I pitched the idea because we were looking at just different content. And this was before the start of the league was suspended and everything. But with the 20th season, we wanted some content. And I was like, well, 20 is such a nice round number. That's a perfect number for a list. So let's do the top 20 players in league history. And my editor was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then when I sat down to start it, I was like, oh, man, I might have bitten off more than I can chew here. So it started just making a list of names, guys that, obviously John Grant Jr. was going to be on there. So you write his name down, and then you just think of guys that you've thought of at some point that could be in consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I did talk to some people. I shot some emails, some DMs, some phone calls to some players, past and present, to some coaches, to some GMs, people that have been involved in the league, just to try to make sure I wasn't missing people. Especially, you don't want it to be too recent. You didn't want to have that recency bias.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I didn't actually get to see a guy like Connor Gill play. I started watching after he kind of had made his time in the league. So you want to make sure that guys like that, even if you don't include them, are considered.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Make sure you have them on your list. So then once I had the list of, it was about 45 to 50 guys that I wound up finally being like, all right, this is good. Then you start looking at stats, MVPs, all-star game appearances, championships, trying to get a whole kind of collective body.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to think of, I'm a big Bill Simmons fan, so I tried to think of how his book of basketball ranked and things that he considered, including even just what other people said about that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to consider a lot of it. And then from there, it was ranking them, which was not easy because, like you said, that guys could have slid up and down. I had Brian Splina. I think Brian Splina at 17 or 16, and he has the most championships in league history. I had him higher at one point. I had him lower. It was a lot of guys who were trying to jockey where they should be because that is difficult once you start looking at some of their careers.
For sure. Especially, because we could maybe come up with the same 20 list, but then rank them completely different. That's the other thing is not only are you coming up with, top 20 of all time, but you're also coming up with, where they rank. And, like you said, it's kind of multiple ways to skin a cat, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, and it was so crazy too, because, Brian Splina, 7 championships. And when you think of guys that are like league icons, he pops in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at Nicky Polanco,
mm-hmm.
who is kind of like his partner in crime.
Yeah.
Didn't have as many championships, but he had more all-star appearances and more Defensive Player of the Year awards. So it's like, okay, now you got to consider that. And a guy like Tom Schreiber, who played 5 years in the league, really, if you don't include his last year where he was injured a lot, it was really more like, it was closer to 4.
Yeah.
But he had 2 MLL MVP awards.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of only like 2 or 3 guys that had 2 MVP awards. So, his career is shorter, but the body of work is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot to play with.
Yeah, speaking of the shorter careers, but I mean awesome careers at the same time. I was appreciative as a goalie that you had the cat, Greg Catrano, in the top 10. I think he needed to be there, so I was very much so appreciative of that.
Well, and that was another one. You think of goalies in MLL history, Brian Doherty comes to everybody's mind first.
Yep.
But you've got to give Catrano credit for being the only goalie in league history to have a league MVP and a championship MVP. So while as awesome Doc is and won a lot of championships, and you could flip him, but to me, I had some weight in those MVPs that he had. So that was one. And I wanted to give love to the defensemen too. So obviously I had Brody Merrill really high, but I think Lee Zink was another guy that kind of went under the radar for a long time.
Yeah.
So I tried to give love to all positions. It's easy to be like, this guy had 400, 500 points. He's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to get those defensemen and goalies in there, but I tried to give love to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, and if you were talking about Bill Simmons, if Pro Lacrosse, whatever league it may be, is big enough where we can do a redraftables from past drafts, you know we've made it, right? We can start there, Phil.
That would be super fun. That would be awesome. That would be cool.
That sounds like a fun segment we'll have to do down the road for sure. Yeah. Going off of that though, you mentioned a little bit the Lacrosse Lounge. How did that come about? And like, do you have any interest in getting more back into the radio per se? Are you still like more the writer? Was that kind of, like what do you enjoy more and how did that come about?
I've always been a writer, or always kind of preferred that. And that's when I went to school, print was my predominant, my focus.
Mm-hmm.
But I had written just for fun some MLL stuff that I posted. This is at the time where Bleacher Report, anybody could post on Bleacher Report.
Yeah.
So I had an account and I was posting stuff, and I just did a couple MLL pieces for fun, and at the time, in Lax We Trust, Marissa and Jemmy was on that site, and she reached out to me asking if I wanted to do the show, and I thought it was something different because I had such a focus on print. I was like, well, this could be different and fun and kind of round out my resume more, give me some more skills. So I took her up on that. I did the show. She got me in contact with some of the PR people at the time so I could get my guests. And I had the first one, I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I forgot my first guest was Billy Day, former Cannons goalie and Cannons coach.
Yep.
And I had never used the program before either that we worked it on. It's not as easy as Zoom, but I saw him in my waiting room and I forgot to I didn't know I had to click on him to actually let him in. So I'm talking to him and like not getting anything back.
Oh,
and it turns out he wasn't even I hadn't even admitted him into the interview yet. So I was nervous about that. And then, of course, I realized I never even started recording. So all the babbling I was doing on my own was not even recorded.
Yeah.
So after I got over those first one jitters, it got a lot easier each time.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. The reason I stopped, big reason, was I was starting to pick up a lot of odd freelancing, like a lot of stuff. I was starting to coach. I was also going back and taking some extra classes to get my teaching license. So I was doing a lot of stuff, and the show, I was not bringing in any money for it. So it was like, okay, this one is a lot of work for not as much return of investment. It's fun. I enjoyed it. It was something different that did well around me and get me more acclimated to reaching out to people for these interviews and things. But at the time, it just wasn't giving me enough back to keep doing it with some of the other stuff I was doing it. I thought about getting back into it. It would be kind of fun. But we'll have to see if an opportunity arises, if I have the right amount of time. I guess I should have started with quarantine.
Yeah. Well,
but
you're
you guys are
always
doing such a good job. I don't want to step on your toes either.
No, you're good. You're always welcome to hop on if you want to talk MLL. And we appreciate that because we understand the grind. I mean, I can't tell you how many times me and Adam, we've luckily never had that issue where we haven't recorded, but there's always been times where we weren't sure and something's happened. I think the worst happened was one time we were recording Commissioner Sakevich with the NLL, and luckily, I thought I had it all set up, and I'm like, let me just put on my phone voice recorder real quick. And luckily I did that because the audio sounded like crap, but you could still understand him. But luckily I did that because the other ones, sure enough, did not come through. So, things happen. We've been there before, and so we always have redundancy. We have this Zoom recording. I have something recording as well on the side just to make sure, if we do lose with something for whatever reason, we're good. But Zoom's pretty reliable.
That's the way to do it. Even when I go to games, and I probably did. I should have done it, but I didn't do it this year. But a lot of times I'll have my voice recorder, but then I'm like, well, if the voice recorder craps out in the middle of it, let me have my phone going. Yep. But I bought the voice recorder, so I didn't have to use my phone anymore.
Yeah.
I remember doing the show. The thing that I was the worst at, and I still struggle with now, when you schedule something with a guest and something happens and the guest never calls it in. Mm-hmm. So then I'm just, especially because it was live too. So I know you guys record it and then, work on it and edit it and then put it up. But mine was live and then eventually just would be available for download on iTunes. So I'm doing this live show with no guest and I'm talking to myself. And I do not do well talking to myself. Even now, I teach middle school English, and I've been during quarantine doing book talks just for the kids. And when I'm staring at the camera, not talking to anybody but myself, I always feel extra awkward.
Yeah.
So that was something I struggled with. And I wound up repeating myself a lot when that would happen. It didn't happen that often, but there were a couple times it happened, and I'd be like, all right, I'm good. And my show was 40 minutes, and I'd be good for 10 minutes, and then I just started repeating myself. It was really awkward.
Yeah, no, we ran into that a few times, not too much, because we sometimes do the either the Instagram live interviews or we do our YouTube live. streams, and the YouTube live streams have been pretty good. Sometimes too, it helps, like, you know, it's always me and Adam, and maybe sometimes we'll have Dan on, so you at least can like bounce off each other. I remember the Instagram live though, we were like, I was waiting and stalling, so Adam popped on, and finally, you know, our guest came on. But you know, sometimes you kind of, I forget about like the live aspect. If you don't have them on, you know, you just gotta, you know, improvise, and it can be difficult sometimes. But yeah, we definitely understand. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. Today I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Anchor. We've been using Anchor for the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast, and once it's published, they send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. They also connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast today, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Today I also want to talk to you about our affiliate Parkside Cards. Parkside Cards is your go-to source for Major League Lacrosse trading cards. They have a variety of packs on their website, including a box set that comes with 4 tickets to an MLL game, and a Lyle Thompson signature pack that comes with a limited edition signed Lyle Thompson card. The best part is we've teamed up with Parkside Cards to provide you with a special discount. Simply visit parksidecards.com and use the code PLT to save 20% on your order today. Let's go into the book a little bit, though. Tell us about how you came up with the idea for the book, and then the process, you know, interviewing all these people that are going to be featured in it. You know, tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so a book was something I really wanted to do for a long time. And just because I thought it would be cool, it's a little bit of vanity to see your name on the cover of a book. But it was an idea that I always had to do a book. And I think it really got hammered home doing the weekly features for Lacrosse Magazine. You know, I put a lot of work into them, and they're good and they're well received, but a lot of times, you know, they're really get a lot of attention that week, and then the next week it's forgotten about. So I wanted to do something with a little bit more staying power, something that I could eventually have kids and be like, hey, look at this, look what I created, look what I did. So that was something I'd always wanted to do it. And obviously I've worked and covered Major League Lacrosse for a long time, and that was going to be my niche. And so I started thinking of different ideas. You know, I didn't want to do just a book on one person, because that person could write their own story. I wanted to do something a little bit more wider focused, and maybe something a little bit more that, you know, went beyond just here's this one person and, you know, they're really great at lacrosse. I wanted to do something that a lot of people can relate to. And as I was thinking of different ideas, I also was thinking about, well, you know, there's only, at the time, there were 9 teams. You know, you look at the NBA is over 30 teams, NFL, MLB, all these leagues are over 30 teams. And I thought, with 9 teams, that's really manageable to go see each team once. Because part of this too was I do a lot of work, you know, from home, over the phone. I'm not, you know, I live in Virginia, but it's still like 2 hours to get to Chesapeake. You know, when I was in New Jersey, it was still a long drive to get to Lizards games on Long Island. And I didn't start till after the Pride and the Barrage were gone. So I wanted to get in front of people too. A lot of people saw my work online. A lot of people interacted with me over social media and spoke to me on the phone and email, but we didn't have that face-to-face interaction. So I wanted to do that. So I was like, okay, well, I need to get to games to do that. And okay, well, if I'm going to 9 games, I can do that in one season. So what is interesting or unique about each situation? And that's where I was like, okay, well, they all have different stories and different fans, different people that for some reason that team and that city and that location is special to them. And that's kind of where I started going off with the idea of, okay, this league, this team, this city, there's something special there. And the idea was before the PLL came. So when the PLL was announced, we lost over 100 players from MLL into PLL. I say we, I just mean we as fans. You know, so there was that split, and then we went to 6 teams, And I was a little bummed, but at the same time, I was like, okay, well, 6 teams is even more manageable to get to in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And those people that still support lacrosse, their lacrosse teams, obviously a guy like JoJo Wardrummer still is a huge Denver Outlaws fan, even though there is the PLL. Yeah. And those players that did decide to stay, because while over 100 players left for the PLL, there still were guys that had an option to go to the PLL and chose to stay with the MLL team. So it was, okay, well, they were already sacrificing to be in this league, with between the salary and the work schedule and everything. They already were sacrificing. And now there's something that is getting a lot more buzz, a lot more attention, and possibly could lead to more money. Why did they stay in this one spot that they were in? Why did they stay in this league? And these fans, why are they? We like to be a part of something bigger than us, and a lot of things that are popular do that. We all want to be part of the conversation. Why are they so passionate about this thing that isn't part of a lot of conversations happening and at the water cooler or anything like that? So I thought that was a pretty neat angle, and I went to I went to every game, talked to some players, talked to some coaches, some executives, some fans to try to get that that why. And there were a lot of cool stories. And I remember being a little nervous about it because there aren't really any lacrosse books, let alone books about Major League Lacrosse. So I was definitely worried that people thought I was going to be weird. I remember being nervous to ask people because I reached out to some authors of different books that I had read of all sports and just kind of asked about their process. And it was Ian Thompson who wrote The Soul of Basketball, which was kind of about the year that the Mavs beat the Heat in the championship. And I was asking him some questions, and one of the things he said is you have to be honest. To get the responses, you want the people that you interview to be honest with you. So you have to be honest up front with them. Because I was thinking, maybe it's going to sound weird. Maybe they'll think I'm weird to want to do a book. They're always so good about doing interviews, but a book is just such a concept that we don't really see. They'll think I'm weird. So maybe if I just say I want to interview you and ask about you, and then I put it all in a project at the end, I can get away with that. But when I got that advice to be honest with the people and upfront with the people that I'm interviewing, it's like, all right, well, if they think I'm weird, they don't have to do the interview, and I'll try and do something else. But when I told them about the book idea, a lot of people were like, wow, that's really cool. We don't have that. I would definitely want to be a part of that. They were super supportive. And again, I got a lot of honest stories, and it was really neat to do. I really appreciated all the help that I got. I really hope that the stories that I share are ones that everybody's going to value and find interesting.
No, that's great. Are there any stories in particular that you want to share? I know we don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce, but any along your journey, like games, whether it was a location you went to and the fans were just, really passionate and you didn't expect that, or any stories from along the road?
Yeah, so 2 stories that you guys I've listened to the podcast. You had Kai Iwamoto on from the Denver Outlaws, and he was one of the guys that one of the first people when I was thinking about what I wanted to do. He was one of the first people that I was like, oh, he's a guy I definitely have to talk to. I was actually a little nervous. I was like, I hope he's on the team this year, because I would love to get that story of him coming from Japan. So I know you guys have talked to him. He's a really cool guy and really appreciative. And his story is really special. And even talking to some people about him, how they're just kind of, in awe. John Cohen talks about the Outlaws GM, and Dylan Ward, who was the starting goalie for the Outlaws last year. Just such complimentary things to say about him. So he was a guy whose story I thought was awesome. Bryce Wasserman, you guys have had on the pod. He was another one talking about how he asked to be released from the Outlaws in order to get an opportunity. And that was one of the cool things. Not only was he a rookie, he was one of the last picks drafted. And here he is telling his team, hey, I know you guys are giving me a spot on the roster, but I'm not playing. Can you release me? That's the courage it takes to do that, thinking he's got no game film to go off of. These teams are midway through the season. They all passed on him in the draft already. Who's to say he's going to get picked up? So, and then being from Dallas and getting to play with the Rattlers last year, I thought was a cool story. Another guy I mentioned earlier, JoJo War Drummer. He's a guy that we all see on social media. We see in the pictures. We see at the games. He's like a focal point. But I felt like his story wasn't really told by many people, or if anybody at all. I didn't find any, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he was a cool one to talk to. So those were some cool stories. Going to Massachusetts, going to the Cannons games, I'll share, a focal point there was they have a lot of guys that were Cannons fans when they were kids. There's a lot of guys in the league that went to games, but not many that went to games of the team they're on.
Yeah.
And to have at the Cannons, Nick Morocco, James Fahey, and Marty Bowes last year, all of them were kids that went to Cannons games. Their goal was to play for the Cannons, not even to play in MLL. It was like, I want to be a Cannon.
Yeah.
So to have that kind of link between them as kids, now as players, and helping other kids try to follow that dream, those were cool stories. And as far as games, I had to go to the July 4th Denver Outlaws game.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to one game. If I'm going to go to one game for each team, I can't go to any game but the 4th of July game.
Right.
And that was crazy this year. I was a little bummed because there were 3 weather delays throughout the game.
Yeah. I remember staying up for that game, and I'm like, okay, that's it. They're going to call it now. And they're like, nope, we're back. And I'm like, okay. Nope, they're going to call it now. No, and they never called it. They just kept playing the fireworks after still.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. And it was, for me, sitting there in the press box, I was bummed because if the weather was better, the announced attendance was 26,000.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's how many people were there by the end of the game, but I was like, if the weather was nice, it would have been an even bigger crowd. People even walking up and being like, oh, it's a nice day. Let's go to a lacrosse game and see some fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a bigger crowd. And without the weather delays, probably, I'm sure people left. So it would have been more people there longer. But I was impressed with the people that did stay. They were there the whole game. They were into it the whole time. It was ended like midnight around their time.
Yeah.
So you're there for 4 or 5 hours. It's a long time, but they were still into it, and they were really knowledgeable and passionate. They knew when the right times to cheer were and everything. It was still really cool to see, and just being in that size stadium for a lacrosse game was really neat. I went to the walkthrough that morning, just walking in through the tunnel onto the field and seeing the Bronco up in the stands.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is really incredible atmosphere. Because, and this is no offense, but going to the Blaze game, I went to the Atlanta Blaze game before the Broncos game. They were playing at a high school.
Yeah.
I was like, it was cool being in Atlanta. I'd never been to Atlanta before, and there was a lot of cool things around. But the game was at a high school with like the concrete stands.
Yeah.
It didn't look as cool. So then the next game, you're walking into an NFL stadium. You're like, this is pretty cool. And the Dallas stadium playing at the Star, that was really neat. Really excellent facility. For as awesome as the Broncos stadium was, as awesome as an atmosphere and awe-inspiring it was, the Rattlers facility was really, really neat. Lighting and the way the stands were above the field and you walked in and just kind of the shops and restaurants around it. It was a really cool feel. I wish they would have gotten more time in Dallas because that was a neat place to play.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That the Star, I think, it's kind of cool because it's it's not the actual Dallas Cowboy Stadium, but it's like it looks almost exactly like it and has that intimate atmosphere. And then you mentioned obviously Mile High. That's got to be the most popular answer all the guests that we have on that have played there give when we ask them their favorite venue. It's always, Mile High. They're like, there's nothing like that, being in a pro stadium atmosphere. But no, that's awesome.
Yeah, and for the Q&A for the New England Lacrosse Journal, that's always a question I ask. Like, what's your favorite visiting stadium? And Denver for the pro players happened so many times.
Yes.
It was cool to experience that in person. I'll tell you what, the Cannons home field in Quincy, the press box was tiny. We were a little crammed in there, but everything else was really well done. You can tell they put work into it. And especially the first game of the season last year against the Lizards, they really packed that place in. And those fans were pumped. They were there 2 hours before the game. I was so surprised because when I was when I talking to the PR person about when to do the interviews, sometimes I'd go to practice the night before, sometimes I'd go to the walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
The Boston game was June 1st. I was still teaching, so I couldn't get there that much early. I didn't have any days to take off at that point of the year. So I flew in Friday night. I got in at like 1 a.m. I took a really late flight. And and I didn't hear anything about walkthrough. I don't know if, what the plans were for that. He was like, "I just come, gates open at 2." And I was like, Friday before a 4 o'clock game. I was like, gates open at 2. There's going to be nobody there. And it was packed. They had youth tournaments going on, youth teams playing on the field. They had Joshua Tree, which is a U2 cover band playing. They had the rock climbing. They had the beer garden. There was so much going on. There were so many people. I was like, this is awesome. And it was cool, too, because, and I mentioned this in the book, at that point, there had been so much bad news leading up to that season.
Mm-hmm.
With the folding of the teams. A lot of people, jumping on the PLL bandwagon. And I want to say this. I don't want people to get upset. The PLL is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The level of lacrosse is excellent. The presentation on NBC Sports is really cool. Like, I don't want people to think because I wrote about a book about MLL, I'm a PLL hater. Not the case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's on this podcast. We're always trying to, we give everyone their due because we're Pro Lacrosse Talk. We're all for professional lacrosse. As fans, we have never had it better than now, having all these leagues and stuff.
Exactly. And I think one of the issues coming into last season's MLL season, which made me more pumped to even write my book, was there were a lot of people that were just like, oh, PLL's the thing, MLL is trash.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really degrading. And I was disappointed it didn't affect me too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I was disappointed for the players that were in MLL because just because they weren't in the league with Paul Rabel, you're going to say that they're not worthy of being a professional player. Like, the amount of work that those guys take to get to those spots. Some of them just hadn't had an opportunity to shine because there were only so many spots.
Mm-hmm.
Now with PLL and MLL, instead of 9-team MLL league, we had 12 professional lacrosse teams, which was more positions for players. So there was a lot of negativity about MLL coming into the season last year. And to go to that first game in Boston, which was also, PLL opened up at Gillette, not too far away.
Yeah.
So to have that group of fans be so excited and to be so present at the game was like, all right, this is really cool and this is going to be a fun journey. And it was really a great start to the trip, and really was a lot of fun and set the tone the rest of the way.
And do you have any thoughts on the upcoming season at all? I know we haven't really heard much about it, but they are entering their 20th anniversary season. What excites you about this? Now they're returning to the Philadelphia market. They're returning as well to the Connecticut market, which was one of the original teams with the Barrage, and now it's a new team in the Hammerheads. So, I know we're not going to be able to attend any of these games, but how excited are you for this 20th anniversary season?
I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be really cool. I hope that with a lot of people that have been inside and looking for sports to come back when Major League Lacrosse does come back, and that's the news that we have, that they are going to come back for a season, whatever it looks like. I really hope a lot of people give both leagues, and especially MLL, a viewing, a look. I think it's going to be super exciting. I am really excited to see the Barrage. They have that organization has so much history, and talking to Spencer Ford about it a lot this offseason. Some of the things that he wants to do with that team and the way he's kind of orchestrated and put those pieces into place, I think they're going to be really interesting to watch because it's a team, it's jerseys, it's colors, but they're not the same team that was from the past. But Spencer Ford has really put a lot of work into kind of trying to recreate that atmosphere around that team, that kind of mentality with that team. So I think that's going to be really cool to see. Obviously, I'm curious to see how the Cannons do with Randy Stotts and Bryce Wasserman and Mark Cockerton all in the same attack line. My preview for Lacrosse Magazine, I think Mark Cockerton's going to be a huge MVP candidate this year because not only is he a great player and a great scorer, but Randy Stotts is an unbelievable passer.
Yep.
And Bryce Wasserman really does a lot of dodging. I think when you put a lot of focus on those two, not to mention having Brian Cole in midfield and Jalen Rogers, I think Cockerton's going to get a ton of looks that might not have been there before. So, and not that Will Sands is also a fantastic passer. But Randy Stotts is going to get some different defensive coverage, I think. And it'll make Cockerton, really get some opportunities. Connecticut, they had such a great run last year at the end of the year as the Rattlers. I think they might pick up from there. I'd love to see what Sean Scanoni does as an encore. He had such a great story as a rookie last year, undrafted, and wound up being, goalie of the year and an MVP candidate. So I'm really curious to see what he does with Connecticut. Obviously, New York is going to be interesting because they're going to have they had a really tough year last year. And they're going to need some new guys to step up, especially on offense, with the departures of Kevin Crowley, who they traded, Rob Pannell going to PLL. But Dylan Malloy is there. And they had some young guys really step up at the end of last season. Kearns was one that really stepped up. I'm really curious to see how they start to put pieces together. Connor O'Hara is going to be a nice addition for them.
Yep.
It'll be cool to see how they bounce back. Chesapeake is loaded again, and Lyle was so fun to watch last year. That was with the top 20 players. I got some flack of not including Lyle. And I know you guys mentioned, he really hadn't played that many games all time before this season.
Exactly.
He might be the greatest lacrosse player right now.
Yeah.
And maybe of all time eventually, but you can't go – if you're going off strictly MLL, I mean, this was his first full season. He's even said, too, he was happy to play a full season and a phenomenal season. I mean, if you look at his statistics, what he's done in the 5 years that he's played, and none of them have been full seasons except last year, is phenomenal. But, again, I still wouldn't – you can't put him in the top 20, in my opinion. I know I was going back and forth with a few people on Twitter on that.
I got some hate for that, but not hate, but I got criticized for that. But that was my argument. Was the year before he played 3 games, between overlaps, and you want me to put him in over a guy like Ryan Boyle, who was 19, or Matt Striebel, who played almost 20 seasons. They had such a long body of work. But watching Lyle play last year and getting a full season from him was incredible. He was so fun to watch. And, hopefully we get, more magic from him this year. I'm really looking forward to that. And Denver, they lost a lot of guys this year, but you can never count them out. They're always find pieces to fit.
Yep.
And, John Cohen said it earlier in the year in their press release when they talked about the teams. They're a little butthurt about how things ended last year. So they're going to be coming back with a vengeance. And when you've got guys like John Grant Jr., Max Adler, and Mikey Schlosser, who not only are super talented, but are now kind of pissed and want some revenge, I think it's going to be really fun to see what they put out. Curious to see the goalie situation play out there. Obviously, with Shuda from Vermont, who's super talented, and they've got some other guys on their roster. Would love to see Kai get in the mix too, but it'll be interesting to see how they do there. But every team's got a really cool story. I didn't miss anything. I got Philly, I got New York, I got Connecticut.
Yeah, we
talked
Boston. Yeah, that's everybody.
I got everybody. I want to make sure I didn't.
I
want to make sure everybody had a story. There's going to be a lot of cool stories. And whatever it looks like, I know we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it's probably going to be closer to a sprint than a marathon. So to see these guys come out of the gates and have that pressure right away, I think it's going to make for some really interesting, fun, competitive lacrosse.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned Adler. I've talked to him a little bit just because he wrote that piece on Courier and his greatness. And yeah, they're still not happy about how that season ended last year. Yeah. They're ready to come back for vengeance. And like you said, Denver's been a dynasty for so long. You could probably write a book on that, honestly, Denver's dynasty.
Might be the next idea.
Yeah, there you go.
Let me take that down in my notebook. I've got some ideas of other possible books, but we might have to add that one to the list.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I think they're going to be in a good spot. I know Adam's really excited to see his barrage back.
I know. I try and be unbiased as I can, right, with what we do. But I was meeting Kyle Sweeney in middle school and talking to Doc and all that kind of stuff. So I've watched way too many barrage games on YouTube over the last few years. So I'm excited to be able to see him in person again.
Hey, and that's totally cool. I think that's one of the cool things about sports in general. You know, you go any kind of sports journalist, most of us get into it because we love sports and we already have favorite teams.
Yep.
It's a little easier for me when I first started watching MLL. It was New Jersey Pride I was into, and they don't exist anymore, so I don't have to worry about any allegiances. But, you know, I mean, we talked about Bill Simmons. He makes it known he's a fan of the Boston teams. But you still can enjoy what he does, and he still gives informed opinions about everything. Mike Wilbon is a huge Chicago fan. Tony Kornheiser's a New York fan. Like, a lot of sports journalists, especially the personalities, we know who they root for, and it doesn't, you know, some people, I guess, get upset, but for the most part, you can still watch and be entertained and still not feel like they're, you know, just saying that their team is the best. So you go and enjoy those barrage games. That's totally okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Phil, we really appreciate it. I want you to tell people where they can find the book and where they can order it when it comes out. So that way, you know, if they want to pick up a copy, you can get it online, right? So tell people where they can find that book.
Yeah, absolutely. So Major League Life, that's the book. It's going to be available on Amazon in print and as an ebook. So that'll be the place to go. I think eventually some other outlets might have it, but especially right now, Amazon's going to be the place to go for that. Print and ebook, whichever you like. I know personally I love to have that hard copy in my hands, but you know, I know we're in a digital world and that's how people get their content. So I wanted to make sure it was available for both. So Amazon, Major League Life by Phil Shore, going to be where you find it. Find me on Twitter at pshore15. I'll do a lot of book promoting on there too. But even beyond that, I love talking lacrosse with anybody. So, you know, you come in my mentions with some fun lacrosse chat. I'm absolutely for it. Absolutely for it.
Awesome. No, we really
appreciate you guys having me on.
No,
I appreciate the support. I'll be sending you guys a little teaser from the book that you guys can put on the website. That'll be really cool. And you guys have been doing some really fun stuff. So thank you guys for letting me be a part of it. I know I'm no Max Adler getting it right for your website. I'm no Bryce Wasserman that you get to talk to. I'm sure his numbers might be bigger than mine on these downloads, but I appreciate you letting me talk about the book and just having a lacrosse chat with you guys.
No,
awesome. Happy to join you guys on this anytime you guys want.
No, absolutely. It's an awesome chat.
I have trouble scheduling a guest. You bring me on.
All right, we will. I mean, I didn't know before we had you on about the Lacrosse Lounge. When I was doing my research, I found that, and I thought that was awesome. So we'll definitely have you on. We would have you on anyway. But we really appreciate you coming on, talking about the book. Again, you know, like you mentioned, the excerpt that's going to be on our website, guys. We will drop the link in our show notes as well when it is released. So when this episode comes out, it might not be up on Amazon just yet, but you know, just check our website, check Phil's social media periodically, and it will be up there eventually. But yeah, we appreciate you coming on. It's always fun talking lacrosse, especially with all the history that the MLL does have. I think, you know, that gets lost a little bit, and I think what you're doing with, you know, touching on that with this book is really important. And so we appreciate you telling your story on this podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a lot of fun.
Today I also want to talk to you about our affiliate Parkside Cards. Parkside Cards is your go-to source for Major League Lacrosse trading cards. They have a variety of packs on their website, including a box set that comes with 4 tickets to an MLL game, a Lyle Thompson signature pack that comes with a limited edition signed Lyle Thompson card. And the best part is we've teamed up with Parkside Cards to provide you with a special discount. Simply visit parksidecards.com and use the code PLT, save 20% on your order today.